There's like in Vermont too, I know
Yep.
Woodstock has
Yeah,
its own
forget
little
it.
place
Yep.
where you can go into Woodstock and you can, this car is fine, but there are a lot of places in Vermont too.
Yeah.
It's just, that's why one of the issues in the league now is net neutrality too. We issue, that's a really important issue for
Yeah.
us. It's because it's just, it's the schools, it's the children that are being,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, disaffiliated.
Okay, before we actually start the live streaming, would you please shut off or silence your cell phones and any other electronics that you may have? Would everybody please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I'm Nina Rosamondo, President of the League of Women Voters South County. On behalf of the League, I would like to welcome you to the Meet the Candidates Night for the Rhode Island House District 38. Mr. Geary and Mr. Kennedy, their district covers sections of Westerly, Ashaway, Bradford, Hope Valley, and Hopkinton. The views expressed tonight are those of the candidates, not of the League of Women Voters. And the sponsorship of this debate is not an endorsement by the League of any candidate. One of the most important duties we have as citizens is to learn about issues and candidates so we can make informed choices when we vote. If you find a forum like this is an essential part of your election decisions, please consider joining the League and help provide Westerly with nonpartisan voter education and advocacy for open and accountable government. The League is open to both men, yes, men, and women. There are membership materials on the table by the back door. Please take a minute and check them out. There's also a lot of other voter information. Democracy works only when citizens participate in the process. Forums like this can easily become a lost resource to Westerly if citizens are only spectators in the process. So talk with a League member tonight, consider attending a monthly meeting, take the time to learn more. We are here tonight to ask questions of the candidates, Mr. Geary and Mr. Kennedy, and to listen respectfully to each of them as they discuss issues important to the future of Westerly and Rhode Island. We appreciate your voter interest and enthusiasm, but please hold your applause and refrain from reacting to the candidates' answers. This is a nonpartisan forum. I would now like to welcome and thank our moderator tonight, Jane Coster, serving her third term as League of Women Voters of Rhode Island president. She is also on the League of Women Voters Newport County Board of Directors and served as treasurer for both the League of Women Voters Newport County and the League of Women Voters Rhode Island. She has been a resident of Rhode Island since 1970 and resides in Jamestown with her husband, who is also a member of the League. She is also on the League of Women Voters Newport County Board of Directors and served as treasurer for both the League of Women Voters Newport County and the League of Women Voters Rhode Island. And now to Jane.
Thank you, Nina, and thank you, candidates, for being here and participating in this forum. The format for the panel this evening: the 1-minute opening statements will be made in seating order, so Mr. Kennedy and then Mr. Geary, and then in reverse order, the closing statements. Because there are only 2 candidates appearing at this forum, each candidate will be given 90 seconds to answer each question, and then each candidate will be given an additional 30 seconds for further comment. There will also be a series of lightning round questions, yes or no questions, addressed to both candidates. Each candidate will be given 10 seconds to elaborate beyond a simple yes, no. And please remember to face the camera, and we will begin now. So, opening statements, Mr. Kennedy.
Good evening. I'm Brian Patrick Kennedy, and I've had the honor to serve as your state representative for 30 years and to represent the interests of Westerly and Hopkinton at the State House in Providence. Just a brief biography. I'm a lifelong resident of the area. Born in Westerly, grew up in Hopkinton, graduated from the Charahoe Regional School District, received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Providence College with a double major in History and General Social Studies. And I pursued a master's degree in business administration from Anna Maria College in Massachusetts. I'm a small business owner, and I operate a real estate appraisal business. I've always had an interest in politics, and after serving as a legislative page at the State House during my college years, I decided that someday I would run for office and hopefully get elected to work on behalf of the people. I'm currently the Speaker pro tempore, which allows me to preside over the House, and I am the Dean of the House. I previously served 20 years as the chair of the House Corporations Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Geary.
Good evening. Thank you, ladies, for having us tonight. My name is Michael James Geary. I'm 53 years old. I reside at 16 Tomquag Road, Bradford, Allen, or as some people call it, Simplicity Farms. Excuse me. Yeah. I'm a 20-year Navy veteran. I served my country honorably, was discharged. I am employed by Frito-Lay Northeast. As a fleet manager, I maintain $3.2 million worth of rolling stock every day for Frito-Lay. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Mr. Kennedy. The first question. If elected, how will you keep all your constituents apprised of your positions on issues that come before the state legislature? And specifically, will you commit to hold 2 or 3 town hall and listening sessions in Westerly and Hopkinton before the 2020 election?
When I first was elected 30 years ago, I did listen-in sessions such as that. We found that very few people showed up at listen-in sessions. At that time, I represented the towns of Charlestown, Richmond, and Hopkinton. And each one of those town halls, there was a meeting, and in each town hall, if we got 1 or 2 people, we were very lucky. For the most part, I provide information to my constituents. If they contact me on an issue, I am very quick to get back to them. Whether that's where they call me at home, because I provide my telephone number, my home telephone number, or whether it's through an email or any other type of source. I have not resorted to doing mailings at this point in time, but that's always a possibility that I would consider doing in the future if necessary. But I do believe that I'm very open and available to my constituents throughout the 38th Legislative District. They find me at town hall meetings when I'm asked to attend by the local town council. I'm at school committee meetings when I'm asked to attend by the school committee members. And of course, always at the State House where they can easily get in touch with me there as well.
Thank you. Mr. Geary?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. If elected, how will you keep all of your constituents apprised of your positions on issues that come before the state legislature? And specifically, will you commit to hold 2 or 3 town hall and listening sessions in both Westerly and Hopkinton before the 2020 election?
Yes. Throughout my campaign, I provided my cell phone, my email, and any other social media aspects that could help me on the campaign. I believe it's important that people find out exactly where you stand on the issues and to hear their issues and concerns on that. Yes, I do attend town hall meetings in Hopkinton. I do attend some here in Westerly when available. I do travel a lot, but I do attend. Yes, I would have a town hall meeting with constituents as 2 or 3 times or before the 2020 election. Thank you.
Okay, so the second question, and I'll start with Mr. Geary. What specific proposals do you support for incentivizing economic development in Rhode Island? Please include in your answer how you would handle business regulations, tax breaks to attract businesses, and education of the state's workforce for the 21st century jobs.
Sure. First question, Ralph. So I'm a big supporter of small business. Right now, we are too overregulated and too licensed on our small businesses. And what was, I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Please include in your answer how you would handle business regulations, tax breaks to attract business, and education of the state workforce for the 21st century.
As far as
jobs.
tax breaks, I don't think giving out big tax breaks to have companies come here is working for us to that extent. And the third part of the question, I'm sorry.
For education of the state's workforce for the 21st century jobs?
Definitely get into the tech sector, be maybe the leading. We've already worked out that with the submarine school and the welding school. Keep continuously upgrading, helping out as needed as we do.
Thank you. And Mr. Kennedy?
So one of the important things that we did during this last legislative session, the 2019 state budget includes $11 million in job training funds through the Real Jobs Rhode Island program. In addition, we continued funding for other economic development programs in the state, which includes the Rebuild Rhode Island construction tax credits and the Wave Maker Fellowship Program. That particular program targets new college or university graduates who are looking to start up a business in the state of Rhode Island, because obviously we want to retain them in the state of Rhode Island. We don't want them moving elsewhere. Another thing which I think is important is we are making an effort to cut down on the amount of regulation that businesses have to deal with. I, this past year, sponsored legislation to reduce and lighten the regulatory burden on food trucks. Now, that's a small thing, but food trucks have become an important staple here in the state of Rhode Island, and so I was happy to work on that in order to create a statewide licensing system so that these food trucks do not have to go out to each individual community and get licensed. And finally, since we were talking about some of the small businesses in the state, many of our small businesses are truck drivers. And so what we have done is we have been working to help them to acquire their commercial driver's licenses and to do so in an easier manner. Thank you.
Okay, so question 3, and we'll start with Mr. Kennedy. Legislation to allow the line item veto in Rhode Island has been repeatedly introduced into the legislature and not passed, leaving Rhode Island as only one of 6 states not allowing a governor the line item veto. Please describe your position on the line item veto, including your reasons for supporting or not supporting it in Rhode Island.
So there was a commission that was comprised of House and Senate members, as well as some of the constitutional scholars here in the state of Rhode Island, that held meetings as part of a study commission during 2018 on this whole issue of whether to adopt a line item veto here in the state of Rhode Island. They gave their recommendations, and they, at their particular meeting, which was held, I believe, either in May or June of this year, the recommendations came back not to place this on the 2018 legislative, on the ballot as a question for voters to consider. I think that it's important to look at the fact that while numerous states do have a line item veto, in each case, the states do things somewhat differently. And in this particular case, I'm open to considering the possibility of having a line item veto in the state of Rhode Island. But at the same time, I would like to see us do it in a proper way. Our original Constitution was set up by the Founding Fathers here in the state of Rhode Island to allow legislators to have that closest access to the people and to give them the final word. And I do have some concern over the potential of how governors would utilize a line item veto.
Okay, Mr. Geary?
I fully support the line item veto. I would work with legislators in Senate to get it passed. This way it gives a little bit more clarity on when we go to vote every year. Thank you.
Okay, question 4, and to Mr. Geary first.
Yep.
At the beginning of every legislative session, there are proposals for a new set of rules for the chamber. Given the number of bills that are held for further study in committee year after year, many of which are supported by large majorities of the public, what kinds of rule changes would you propose and lobby for, if elected, to increase the number of bills that get voted on by the entire House?
First thing I do is take a look at the bills and see how long they've been sitting there, waiting to get passed, and go to the most important ones for the people. Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy?
So I do sit on the House Rules Committee, which looks at those House rules every year. There are a number of meetings that are held. The first thing that we usually do on the first day of the session is to adopt the previous rules to hold us over until the new rules can be brought forth for the next legislative session. So in January, on January the 1st, which is opening day, that would be the first order of business once the swearing-in takes place. After that, we invite the members of the House of Representatives to bring forth to the Rules Committee their suggestion for things they'd like to see adopted by the state within the confines of the rules themselves. As you just pointed out, there are a lot of bills that are introduced, and I would love to see things move in a more expedient manner, but unfortunately, so much depends on what happens with the adoption of the state budget. That being said, there is a petition process that is available to the members that allows them to get a majority of individuals to sign a petition in order to get a bill moved from the committee onto the floor of the House.
Mr. Geary?
Yes.
So, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. At the end of August, Education Commissioner Wagner signed an administrative directive to all Rhode Island schools which stated, all firearms, including concealed carry firearms, are hereby banned from all public school buildings and grounds by anyone other than visibly identified active law enforcement officials. Please explain your views on this policy.
I disagree with it. All of your people that have CCWs have been vetted, and are fully qualified to use their weapon in the event of a situation. Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy?
I thought it was just me. Nope, my mistake.
Okay. Regarding that particular issue, yes, that was done by Commissioner Wagner. At this point in time, I'm not totally in favor of what he has done in this particular directive. Individuals that do have concealed carry permits have been vetted either by the Attorney General's office or in many cases by the local police. And as such, if in fact those individuals have the right to carry, then that right should continue whether it is on school grounds or any other place. So I do not support the commissioner in what he did.
So the, Mr. Geary? No. Oh, Mr. Kennedy for the yes, no. Okay, so if Speaker Mattiello is reelected, will you vote for him to be the Speaker of the House?
Yes, I would support Speaker Mattiello. I think he has done a good job as far as he has approached his tenure as Speaker to be very pro-business, very pro-jobs in the state of Rhode Island. He has, are we only on the 10 seconds now?
Yes, 10 seconds.
Oh, you didn't clarify.
Sorry. Okay. And Mr. Geary,
And the question was, ma'am?
if Speaker Mattiello is reelected, will you vote for him to be Speaker of the House?
As an independent, I would not be able to vote for him Speaker of the House. Independents do not caucus with, excuse me, I cannot join either the Republican or the Democrat Party as an independent. So I would not be able to vote for him.
Everyone votes for the Speaker of the House, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, which means you would have the opportunity to vote for whoever is nominated.
Question 2, do you support the adoption of term limits for members of the Rhode Island House and Senate? Mr. Kennedy?
No, I do not. I believe a term limit is the voters have the opportunity every 2 years to either vote for or against an individual, and so I would not support that. There has not been a state that has adopted term limits in many years.
And Mr. Geary?
100% fully support term limits. Thank you.
So, did you want to rebut the first question, and didn't?
No.
With the 10 seconds? Okay. All right. No, that's okay. So, Mr. Geary, and for question number 2, term limits, and you?
Oh, yes, I agree 100% with term
Okay.
limits.
And question number 3, Mr. Kennedy, would you support legislation to raise the age to buy a rifle from 18 to 21?
No, I will not.
And Mr. Geary?
I agree with the representative. I do not either.
Okay. Question number 4, do you support the use and enforcement of E-Verify throughout the state?
Am I going to get all of these questions first?
No, the next one will go to Mr. Geary
Okay.
first.
So far, that is being utilized in the state of Rhode Island in a number of cases, and it seems to be working in most cases.
And Mr. Geary?
100% support it.
Question number 5, Mr. Geary. There are only 4 states that hold primaries in September or later. Would you support moving Rhode Island primaries to August?
That would be one to go out for the voters and let them decide. Would I support it? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes. Support
No.
or oppose?
Opposed.
And Mr. Kennedy?
I think one of the reasons we don't have it in August right now is because it's the middle of the summer and no one is paying attention to things. However, having it in September, it's too close to the election itself, so I would like to see some type of happy medium that we could move it to.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go back to the general questions, and Mr. Kennedy, we'll start with you. The Rhode Island truck tolls were adopted in 2016 after considerable opposition, but now proved to be collecting more than expected revenue for much-needed infrastructure repairs in the state. What is your position on these tolls? If you want to see them revoked, how do you propose to fund the essential and extensive infrastructure projects? And if you support the tolls, explain the reason for your support.
So I had a very difficult decision to make when the original toll legislation was brought forth, because I recognized that Hopkinton and Richmond, somewhere in that region, would be one of the first places where a toll gantry would go. But ultimately, I did support this, and as you just pointed out, we are bringing in more revenue than we expected from these particular 2 gantries that are here in the southwest Rhode Island area. That being said, I do not support any increasing of tolls being levied on cars and light-duty pickup trucks and other vehicles in the state without any type of voter referendum. That's what was passed in the General Assembly, and you know, I think that if, in fact, there is any decision made to potentially expand it in the future, that we have to put it to the voters. And I know as a voter, I would not be supportive of that. We are bringing in these revenues. We're finally seeing bridges fixed. As I've gone around door to door and talked to so many people in my legislative district, they're happy to see the roads finally getting fixed and the bridges finally getting fixed in District 38.
Thank you. Mr. Geary?
There we go. Could you repeat the question one more time?
The Rhode Island truck tolls were adopted in 2016 after considerable opposition, but now prove to be collecting more than expected revenue for the state for needed infrastructure repairs in the state. What is your position on these tolls? If you want to see them revoked, how do you propose to fund the essential and extensive infrastructure projects? And if you support the tolls, explain the reasons for this support.
I appeared before you in 2016. I was against tolls. I'm still against tolls. 92% of the people in Rhode Island were against tolls, but one went up anyways. Nobody gets to see the revenue. I don't get to see the revenue. I'm sure Representative Kennedy doesn't get to see the revenue. Just so everybody has counted that in order to make this revenue with these two tolls, there has to be an 18-wheeler there every 10 seconds. Unfortunately, that information is transparent. Nobody isn't there. Nobody gets to see that information. DOT gets a little over $600 million a year in their budget. There's absolutely no reason for tolls. Blaming the tolls on the trucks and the damage isn't the answer. A lot of the damage has been there, and this, unfortunately, is a new cash revenue. A lot of states are starting, and it's eventually going to go to your car. When I go to door, I hear the complete opposite. I hear people, why aren't the roads being fixed? When are we going to start getting the toll on the car? Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Geary, this year, 37 states in the District of Columbia allow some form of early voting. What is your position on early voting, meaning the polls in every town would be open for some period of time prior to an election day in Rhode Island?
I would support early voting for our either handicapped or our seniors to be able to get to the polls. Yes, I support it.
Mr. Kennedy.
So there was a proposal put forth by Secretary of State Gorbea this year to allow for this early voting. I was supportive of that particular piece of legislation because I think it's very important to open up the election system to as many people as possible. It's funny, I received an email recently from a student trying to find out exactly how they can go about getting the necessary ballot mailed to them at the university that they go to. And I got back to them and gave them that information. I know that there are a number of shut-in individuals who are requesting mail ballots this particular election cycle because, once again, they want to be able to do their civic duty, but at the same time going to the polls and having to stand there for a large amount of time waiting in line is often difficult for those senior citizens. So I think having a process of early voting is a good step forward for the state of Rhode Island to have, and we see it on a regular basis around election time when we see what's happening in other states. The people like the fact that they don't have to show up on that first Tuesday of November because they can go early and get it done early.
Thank you. And I'll just remind you that after the general questions, you have 30 seconds to rebut, comment. So we'll start with Mr. Kennedy. District 38 is a predominantly rural area. Do you think the state does enough to support and promote agriculture? Please explain your position.
I think the state does have an individual that's responsible at the Department of Environmental Management who deals with agriculture-type issues. One of the things that, since I've been an elected member, that we've done to assist the agricultural community in the state of Rhode Island is the ability to sell baked goods, as an example. Something that they were never able to do before at their particular locations, they're now able to sell pies and other types of products besides the standard agricultural products that you'd get, vegetables and other things such as that. So I think that's one of the step forwards that we've tried to do to assist the agricultural community. At the same time, I think there's been a good effort put forth to provide the ability of farms to join the Farm, Forest, and Open Space program in the state of Rhode Island in order to cut the amount of taxes that they pay within their respective communities. So, one of the other things which I think is also important is we've made an effort to allow them to diversify what they're doing within their particular farms, which can include everything right down to having the ability to offer solar on their particular facilities.
Thank you. Mr. Geary?
Could you repeat the question, please?
District 38 is a predominantly rural area. Do you think the state does enough to support and promote agriculture?
We do promote it. I am a member of the Rhode Island Farm Bureau. Just like anything we do in this state, it's over-regulated. If a farm stand wants to sell pickles that they grow on their farm, they have to go up and use the state kitchen and pay facilities and be licensed for it. We could do a lot better for our local farmers in South County or in District 38. Thank you.
And, explain, Mr. Geary, your support or opposition to the restoration of cost of living raises to municipal employees and teachers' pensions.
Yes, I agree with it. I am also a retiree. Yes, it should be restored.
And Mr. Kennedy?
When the state pension was, back when Gina Raimondo was general treasurer, was reformed to try to address the current crisis that we've had in the state of Rhode Island. One of the things that was placed in there was that the pension system had to reach a certain level of stability before we, in fact, restored the cost of living adjustments. Now, since that took place, I think we have done a good job to see the pension system stabilized, while the General Treasurer's Office set an amount that the pension was going to be able to profit by each and every year. They set it too high of a bar. And as such, we haven't reached the full stability that we'd like. At the same time, these individuals have gone a significant amount of time without seeing a cost of living adjustment. So I would not have a problem with offering some type of COLA to these retirees as we continue to stabilize that system.
Okay, and so we'll start with the next question with Mr. Kennedy. According to a 2016 Roger Williams University study for the state's Housing Finance Agency, Rhode Island needs to add over 30,000 housing units over 9 years to meet the state's most economically at-risk residents. What specifics do you propose to encourage development to meet their housing needs during your term in office?
I can tell you that creating affordable housing is not an easy process. And I can tell you that having worked on this very issue for such a long period of time, it becomes very difficult to see this happen. For all intents and purposes, every community is supposed to create at least 10% affordable housing. And as of today, there are, other than the urban communities, that has not been met. Now, I think one of the things that has played into this whole reason why it hasn't been met is the fact that the state has not looked at other affordable means of housing. As an example, town of Charlestown, which has a number of trailer parks or mobile homes. Those are not considered into the total stock. According to the state, unless it has a subsidy associated with it, they're not going to consider it as part of the affordable housing. So I think we have to look at trying to address some of these changes within the state so that we can create more of this affordable housing. Because in the case of Westerly, and even in the case of Hopkinton, there are many affordable units out there, but they don't come with a subsidy that allows them to be considered affordable.
Mr. Geary.
Affordable housing has always been one of those sticky things as far as where we're going to put it and where exactly it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to go to the next set of yes/no questions. And we're going to start with Mr. Geary. So, do you support a ban on high-capacity magazines?
No.
Mr. Kennedy.
No, I don't.
Mr. Kennedy, do you support legislation to require that all revenue generated by 911 emergency phone bill fee be spent solely on improvements to the emergency system and not to other telecommunications operations and maintenance?
I would support doing something such as that because of the fact that this money currently, everything in excess of the 911 fees is now going directly into the general fund. I don't think that's the proper way of doing it when we have stipulated what it's for.
And Mr. Geary?
I fully support the money going into 911, into the 911 fund for updates, training, whatever it may be. If we're paying the money into this, it should be going there. It shouldn't be being pulled out by the governor and being put into something else. If not,
Time.
oh, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Geary, do you support an increased statute of limitations from 7 to 15 years for child sexual abuse cases?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Kennedy?
Sorry, Brian.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Geary, do you support the ballot initiative of $47 million for the Environment, Recreation, and Water Infrastructure Bond?
And that is question number 3, right?
That is question, well, this is question number 4 for this yes/no.
Yes, I support it.
Mr. Kennedy?
I do support that as for the voters to decide in November, absolutely.
And Mr. Kennedy, do you support passage of the Reproductive Rights Act?
As of right now, until I have had a chance to see what the legislation is, I'm not going to make a decision on that because I'm not aware of any piece of legislation that's currently before the House.
So your answer is no? And Mr. Geary?
I agree with Representative Kennedy. This is the first I'm hearing about it. I would say no also.
And we're going to go back to the general questions then, and we'll start with Mr. Geary. Please explain your support or opposition to the distribution and value of legislative grants.
I don't have a problem with legislative grants as long as they go into something and it's transparent, you can see it. Unfortunately, here in this past legislative grant season, it seems like some grants, some legislators have gotten more than the average. I think we need to take a look at it and see exactly why some legislators or some districts get more and it translates into votes than just other legislators getting very little.
Mr. Kennedy?
So I do support legislative grants. I think they provide a valuable service. In District 38, I was happy to provide a $3,000 legislative grant to the Hope Valley, Wyoming Fire District. a $3,000 grant to the Hope Valley Ambulance, a $3,000 grant to the Ashaway Ambulance Association, a $3,000 grant to the Ashaway Fire Department, a $4,000 grant to the North End Community Development. I provided a grant to the Hopkinton Historical Association. These are all organizations that struggle on a regular basis to raise monies, and I think something like this, if it enables a community organization like that to be able to accomplish something that they do within the community, or to buy a piece of equipment that they might not be able to provide on their own, then I think that's a good thing. Now, are there individuals that get a greater share than others? Yes, there are. But all members are entitled to put in requests in order to get funded for grants.
To Mr. Kennedy. In the last legislative session, a bill establishing the Rhode Island Forest Conservation Act was held for further study. This act would prohibit any state economic and other incentives to develop or convert forest land for renewable energy uses. If elected, would you support this bill?
The bill, as you just said, was held for further study, and I would like to, since I did not sit on that particular committee, I did not have the benefit of hearing what the testimony was or the reasons behind it, but I would be open to looking at that piece of legislation and learning a little bit more about it. One of the things, I think it's important that we maintain as much of our forested lands as possible in the state of Rhode Island, so that we have those to benefit in the future. At the same time, we're also under a green mandate where the state of Rhode Island is required by 2020 to develop 20% of its energy from renewable energies. So, at this point in time, I understand the concern, but at the same time, I think we also have to look forward, to what the future holds. Now, I can tell you, having gone up to West Greenwich and Coventry last week, and I saw the giant windmills that seem to sprout up through the forest there, I don't want to see those everywhere in the state of Rhode Island either. So I think we have to try to strike a happy balance somehow with our lands.
Thank you. Mr. Geary?
Is it too late to back up to the question you had before about legislative grants?
Yeah, actually, yes, with the format that we
Okay.
suggested at the beginning of the forum.
I would have to see this bill that you're being questioned on and to get a better idea exactly what the bill is about. Thank you.
Mr. Geary?
Yep.
There were several bills on sexual harassment in the workplace during the last session of the legislature. The House failed to bring any of these bills to a vote. Please explain your views on the need for legislation on sexual harassment in the workplace, including in the Rhode Island State Legislature.
Yes, thank you. As far as sexual harassment, towards the end of my Navy career, we were all required to go to it. My employer right now requires me to go to it once a year. It is something that is as sensitive a situation that, yes, all legislators should go to it, and there should be something passed on it.
Thank you.
I would assume.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, same question. So all state legislators were required to attend a session where individuals were brought in to moderate a session with the state legislators, first in the House, later on in the Senate. All employees of the State House were also required to attend a session. This was set up by the Department of Administration to ensure that everyone is informed as possible over what sexual harassment is and how to combat it. Now, as far as the legislation goes, those pieces of legislation came forth from Representative Tanzi's study committee very, very late in the session. And I believe those were sent to the Judiciary Committee, which is not a committee that I sit on. So as far as how much time they had to work on those bills, I do not know the answer. But I do believe that if those bills have merit, then those bills certainly deserve a careful consideration and passage.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, describe what actions you will take if elected to increase public transit in your district.
So I will tell you that one of the most difficult things to do is to get an increase in public transit in the state of Rhode Island. RIPTA has a finite amount of money, and they try to keep those buses in areas where there's a good number of citizens that are going to rely on the use of those buses. So typically you see those within an urban area. Here in Westerly, other than I believe 2 buses a day that go up in the early morning hours to Providence and then come back at night, those are the only full-size buses we ever see. Most of the other transit that we see here are just smaller vans that RIPTA offers. And in many cases, you need to call in advance in order to set up an appointment to be picked up and brought around. We were able, this past year, to expand that service finally into the town of Hopkinton. And I'm so happy about that, because finally the individuals who live at Canachet Cliffs have the ability to get on one of these buses and come down to the Walmart or go to the Stop and Shop and do some of their shopping. So I'd love to see more money for these.
Thank you. And Mr. Geary?
Public transportation down here has always been one of those big things. I would definitely like to see RIPTA or maybe even a private vendor come in and offer more available services for all of us down here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geary. And the last question to Mr. Geary. Are you concerned about the integrity of the 2018 election in Rhode Island? If yes, why? If no, why not?
I'm very concerned about it. There's just, there's with the hacking going on, not sure people are able to vote. If everybody's been vetted that is going to vote, there are a lot of concerns about it. Thank you.
And Mr. Kennedy?
So the Rhode Island Board of Elections say there is nothing to worry about. Our Secretary of State has told us there is nothing that we should be worried about, that the voting machines that we use are very safe, that other than the transmittal of information at the end of the day to the Board of Elections and to the Secretary of State's office, there's no other way that they're aware of where these machines can be hacked at the present time. So I'm hoping that, in fact, that is the case, because obviously we do not want a foreign power such as Russia or China or any other country meddling in our election process. And that being said, I'm hoping that despite everything we may have heard on the national news, that those individuals who have been thinking about going out on Election Day will, in fact, avail themselves of that opportunity to complete their civic duty.
Thank you. Mr. Geary?
Could I add to that, please?
Yes, you have a rebuttal of 30 seconds.
Yep, I think the biggest concern is mail-in ballots, being able to validate them. There hasn't been a tremendous amount from the last 2 elections, the amount of mail-in ballots that have come up. Mail-in ballots, I have a tendency to question a lot of them. Thank you.
Thank you both. And now we will go to the closing statements, and we will start with Mr. Geary.
Sure.
And you have, again, 1 minute for your
Excellent.
closing statement.
Again, I'd like to thank you, ladies from the League of Women Voters and the audience, for everybody coming. As an independent, I am not picked up by either the Democrats or Republicans. I am my own man. I have taken no money from any special interest groups, unions, in that effect. Everything has come from District 38 people. I walked the district from one end to the other and heard everybody's issues and their concerns. Right now, everybody's wondering is, we don't feel like we're being representative down here. We always feel like we're being the last to get anything. We're the first people taxed, we're the first people to get a toll. Congratulations, there's 12 more of them going back up. All the people I talked to in Bradford who feel forgotten, all the people over in Broombridge who feel forgotten, don't feel like they're being represented. And that's not a good way to be. Roads and bridges, take a route around here. Roads are in horrible conditions. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Geary. And Mr. Kennedy?
Thank you. So again, it was a pleasure to be with you this evening. During my time of service in office, I've sponsored numerous consumer protection, health care, and insurance proposals that have directly benefited the people of District 38 and the state. I've worked on behalf of the people and the towns of Westerly and Hopkinton, sponsoring legislation that benefits these communities. I personally respond to telephone calls, letters, and emails from my constituents, since constituent service is a hallmark of my work. I've demonstrated the ability to work with my legislative colleagues and to do what's right for the people in Hopkinton and Westerly. On January 1st, 2019, the new term will begin at the State House, and District 38 needs a proven, effective leader that knows how to get the job done. I ask for your support on Election Day, and I hope to have the opportunity to meet with as many of my constituents as possible as I continue my door-to-door campaign around the district. Thank you.
Thank you both for standing up
Thank
and
you.
being candidates, and thank you for being here at the forum this evening. Lee?
Thank you for having us.
I'd like to thank the candidates again, and thank you to the members of the audience here at the Westerly Town Hall. Thanks to our viewers on Cox Channel 17 or 18, and Verizon Channel 28 or 29, and to our listeners on WBLQ. I'd also like to thank the many people for helping with this forum. The League of Women Voters Rhode Island Education Fund for providing funding, the town of Westerly for the use of the town hall and council chambers, and the staff here at Westerly Town Hall for their help and cooperation. Many thanks to my fellow members of the League of Women Voters South County, who have worked many hours on planning this event, and to the citizens of South County who submitted more questions, in fact, a record number of questions this year. Thanks to the Westerly Public Access Television Studio, PEG-RI-TV, for handling this live broadcast and frequent rebroadcasts of this program. Thanks to WBLQ for the live streaming of this forum, and thanks to the local media covering this forum. This forum will be rebroadcast on Cox and Verizon frequently between now and Election Day. There is a rebroadcast schedule on the table at the back of the room and on the League of Women Voters website, which is www.lwvrisc.org. The forums will also be available to be viewed digitally via the link on our webpage and Facebook. League of Women Voters South County. Again, thank you. And to the audience, I'd really appreciate it if you would complete the surveys that hopefully you picked up on the way in. Thanks.